Want to just talk briefly about a recent travel situation that I was in while it's fresh in my mind. Because I think this is something a lot of people in this country can relate to. So I was caught up in the King's Cross disruption. For those outside the UK, King's Cross is one of the major London termini. It's basically the main train station connecting London and the north of England and Edinburgh. And that particular day, this was the 19th of August, we're talking about 5 days ago now, 5, 6 days ago. There was a big power failure. Okay, now these things happened. They've obviously got that sorted out relatively fast, but it basically meant that evening there was total disruption to the whole southeast, essentially, or at least the whole. I would say the whole of East Anglia. That's what it seemed like. So it was affecting all sorts of services. So basically, what happened is I had the Grand Central from Sunderland to King's Cross, and I was originally going to change from London King's Cross to London Waterloo to Farnborough in Hampshire, where I was meeting my brother. But obviously, King's Cross was just out that night. Now, Grand Central, I have to say, is usually a pretty good service. But on this particular day, I knew something was a bit off because the buffet, the hot machine on the buffet wasn't working. One carriage was really hot. And so when we were told we needed to get off at Peterborough, and I have to say they were polite about that, they issued apologies and so on, and not every company does, but they did. I assumed it was a problem with our train. I assumed it was some technical problem. So anyway, I got off at Peterborough, which is quite a busy interchange station. It's always been a busy railway town, and just everyone seemed to be getting off there. Every service, LNER, every other service seemed to be getting off there. So naturally, I looked at the next train to King's Cross, and it was actually up there. There was information there. I think it was the 1542. But because this had been a power failure, it meant that the information on the boards could not be updated. So people were looking at information that was not valid. Um, Anyway, I naturally went to the information desk and tried to get information. And I kind of, as you do, you just, talk to people in these circumstances, try to find out what's going on, not just staff, just other people. So I was talking to a young woman from France, young woman from Hong Kong, and a few women from London. So we were just trying to like put our heads together and try and work out what was going on. I guess for me, it's a positive side effect of these things that you kind of get a communal spirit going on. That can be a good thing. Um, Anyway, and I've had that in other countries as well. It's not necessarily just a British thing, but I've seen it. I've seen it a lot here. Anyway, I have to say the guy at the desk at Peterborough was very professional and friendly. But one thing I don't understand is I actually told his colleague, well, why is the board saying this if it's like because at that time I didn't know that the power outage was causing that communication problem. Like, why is it saying that if that train is no longer valid? And her attitude was not as professional, not as she was a little bit almost sarcastic. Oh well, change it then. That's pretty much how she responded. In these situations, I always do sympathise with staff because I think they're under a lot of pressure. But I still think they need to be professional at all times. Like I say, the man was, this particular woman wasn't in that situation. But here's the bit I don't get. So anyway, I'll reach the conclusion and come back to this. Eventually, we got a train, me and the others, because we were more or less going the same destinations. The girl from Hong Kong had to catch a connecting flight to Stansted the next day. Anyway, we went to Cambridge. We were originally going to go to Stansted, but we decided to get off at Cambridge because I thought if I go the whole way to Stansted, I'm not going to get to Farnborough tonight. And I didn't really want to stay in central London. So got off at Cambridge, Cambridge Liverpool Street Station, which is also a major London termini. Liverpool Street Station, I got the tube network to Waterloo. Waterloo, I got the last train to Farnborough, which was on the way to Southampton. Now, those connections in London would have been something similar anyway. Actually, the little printout that Grand Central gave me, for some reason, they listed a long way on the London Underground. I found the London Underground pretty easy to follow, so I had no problems with that side of things. Although carrying a bag isn't much fun. But anyway, and just for future reference, if you pay for a ticket destination that's outside Greater London and you're going through Greater London, a mainline ticket is valid on the London Underground. So, for example, if you're going from somewhere in the north to somewhere in Surrey, you can use the London Underground on a mainline ticket. It's valid. Anyway, yeah, and I only had to change the tube once at Embankment, I believe it was. So back to the Peterborough situation, I was there for a good hour, and the problem at Peterborough was not until, in fact, going on to Cambridge, was not from, it was only from kind of this little group of people getting our heads together and going around trying to decipher information for ourselves that we found out we could do that. People were getting taxis to local destinations in East Anglia. We were even thinking we'd need to stay in a hotel that night in Peterborough. So there was a total lack of information. Now, this is my take on it. I understand that sometimes when there's a situation like that, like King's Cross is down, the connecting stations or other stations can only pass on information when they have it. But I think a big problem in this country is leaving customers in the dark, just leaving them in the dark. What would have been wrong with getting on the tannoy and saying, "We are sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for the waiting. We will let you know what's happening as soon as we have that information." To me, that is still more professional than just saying nothing. Or this guy was just explaining the same thing individually to each and every customer. And he was professional, but I don't understand why they couldn't have gotten the tannoy to make a generic announcement. We will give you information as soon as we have it. You know, in this country, it's a lack of information. And I don't know how Britain compares to other countries. I've had a few experiences in France and Germany which were not much better, but Britain's my country, so for this video, I'm talking about the UK. Just a lack of information, right? Um, People need information. People would rather have negative information than no information. That's the point. And railway companies just don't seem to grasp this. For example, if they're going to issue replacement buses or replacement taxis, they need to make it clear to customers where exactly they get those. They need to make it clear to bus companies and drivers that that is what's going on. Now that particular day, there was no issue with tickets because it was not our fault. It was a problem with the system. So, anyone else caught up in the King's Cross situation that day? Let me know what was your experience. Were you at Peterborough that day? May have walked past me. Who knows? Um, I know that things go wrong. I don't expect, particularly in this country, trains to run like clockwork. I actually think one reason why we have a system that is not the most reliable is because it's so old. I mean, some of the railway lines in Britain, they're not going to be the very original Victorian ones, but they're going to be pretty old. I mean, we were the country that invented the railways, right? So it's kind of ironic that we also have some of the poorest services among developed countries. We do have some of the slowest services. But it would be the simplest thing in the world to just make an announcement and say, "I'm sorry, we don't have the information now. We'll give it to you as soon as we can." Now, people might not necessarily thank them for that at the time, but I still think that is better than giving people no information. Because honestly, people were going around Peterborough like headless chickens, wondering what was going on. And that's not good enough. I appreciate that the people at Peterborough couldn't have all the information, but I do think going on the tannoy is a professional thing to do. Um, so, and the French girl made a point that if the first cancelled trains were like an hour before we arrived, why weren't they arranging some sort of replacement services at that point? Um, it's a lack of information, I think, is the problem. Let me know your thoughts. How do you think things could be improved? And by the way, if you're going to say something like, "Oh, don't complain," blah blah blah, I'm not complaining. Personally, I didn't find it that stressful compared to, I didn't have any young children. I didn't have particularly heavy bags or anything like that. Um, Still, though, I didn't really want to spend the night in central London. And at that time, I didn't have a lot of cash. So I just think the important thing is information, information, information. That's all people want. Even if it's just to say we will update you when we get it. Information.